My name is Ashley Bushner, and I'm with the Michigan Opioid Collaborative. Today, we've got Laura Thomas and Tim Shoecraft presenting for us. The Michigan Opioid Collaborative has committed to doing a monthly webinar series, so we hope that you will join us for more webinars in the future. I think that Laura is actually going to talk about some of those here during the presentation. Everyone will be muted during the presentation, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Also, if everybody could sign in to the chat box with their name and email so that we know who's attending, that would be great. And for those of you who would like social work CEUs, Katrina is going to be putting a link in the chat for that. And you'll want to complete that survey as soon as possible to get credit. The survey at the end will redirect you to the certificate for the CME. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to today's presenters.
Thanks, Ashley. Tim, do you want to go first?
Sure, why not? My name is Tim. I'm with the Michigan Opioid Collaborative. I'm the peer recovery project coordinator. I've been with MOC for about 10 months now. Before that, I was working in a clinic in Ann Arbor and FQHC, where we did addiction treatment, MOUD, and just kind of behavioral as well.
And I'm Laura Thomas. I have been working with Dr. Amy Bonner, who's one of the main investigators or the bosses of MOC for the last 8 years. And just background on motivational interviewing, I was first introduced to it in 2011 in grad school, and I've been working on it over the last, I realize it's actually 10 years now, in a lot of different capacities around HIV and STI testing and counseling, substance use, harm reduction, opioid and overdose safety, and things like that. And I completed, or I'm a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, or a member of MINT, since 2018. So just a little bit of background. And so we got some awesome fall, favorite fall activities. It seems like overall a lot of us are excited for cooler weather. Jumping in leaf piles is so much fun. Thank you for sharing that. Going up north and having bonfires, less bugs. Yes, I'm ready for these stink bugs to go away. Yeah, thank you all. All right. And as Ashley mentioned, here is the code. If you want CMEs, if you want CEUs for social work, that link is in the chat. We can probably share it again at the end. So I'm just going to leave this up there for a second so people can get that code or scan it if they need that. It's also at the end of the PowerPoint slides too, and we'll be sending these PowerPoint slides out. So you've got plenty of options in order to get this information. And it looks like this code expires on next Friday, the 15th. So just to keep you aware of that. You know, sometimes after these trainings, you're all catching up on everything you may have missed. So you've got some time. All right.
Before we get started here, I just wanted to take a second and thank everybody everyone for the great responses on the pre-survey or pre-registration questions. They definitely invoked a lot of thought when we were talking this through, and we did some significant restructuring as we thought them through. So I just wanted to thank everybody for filling those out.
Yeah, thank you. You guys brought some awesome perspectives and questions that we weren't thinking about or incorporating. So thank you. And also too, just acknowledging that, so I have experience with MI. I use this MI 3rd edition book to help guide a lot of our presentation discussions with Tim, and also use the Mighty coding manual too. So I have that kind of background. A lot of you also have MI experience, and you all really know your clients and the people that you're working with. You know, you've dedicated all this time and energy with them so that you can kind of help them grow into their full potential and achieve all their goals that they wish. So through this presentation, we do hope that we can kind of have this discussion about what kind of things clients may be bringing to the table with their self-stigmatizing or negative self-talk. and how the MI spirit can be integrated into that, so we can apply it and kind of just help nurture like new interactions that we may have with people, repair ones that may have been fractured, and maintain ones that seem to be going really smoothly already. And this all goes into the fact that like we're going to make mistakes. It's just a fact of life.
Yeah, I mean, we could be perfect with our words, and whatever perfection looks like there. But a lot of the times, some of the things that will come up that will cause our patients or our clients to feel negative, the stigma associated around substance use and whatnot, it can be so internalized that eventually something, no matter how careful we are, it will be triggered. The state of active addiction is a state of an ongoing state of trauma. And just like any other sort of trauma that anybody experiences, I mean, a smell, a color, a sound, something simple could trigger that. And excuse me. And so there's no real way to just be careful enough to not have anything come up. And as far as the reasons to be mindful about it and to really like practice motivational interviewing as opposed to some of the less as we'll talk, the wrestling approach is just an experience that I had. I'm in peer recovery, so I'm in recovery myself, and I couldn't tell you how many times I was taken to the emergency room throughout my addiction. It just, didn't count at some point. And every time I heard the same sort of rhetoric of things like, I need to stop, I'm going to die if I don't, I'm killing myself, to the point where my response to that was just good. That I became what I wanted, or at least how I could best respond to that, because what else am I going to say? I remember the first time I went into care and received medical treatment or social and behavioral in the same place, and it was compassionate, and I felt like I was valued in it. I will never forget those providers. Their faces are still very clear in my mind, and they have made a permanent change, a permanent mark in my life. And that's the reason why these different approaches, motivational interviewing, things like that, these partnerships that we form are just so vital to this care.
So we have a poll. Some of you guys already took this in the registration survey that we sent out, but if you wouldn't mind, you can either go to this website, pollev.com/Laura Thomas 792, or you can text Laura Thomas 792 to the number 37607. And we're just going to get a quick survey of how comfortable people feel with coming back, with building up a relationship or coming back from a mistake that may have happened. I'm going to take this too as we're going.
And there was one of our the responses that we just loved so much, we had to include it in here. It was just the perfect one.
Yeah, thanks to whoever said that you do it because we're human. And so once you get that text or that website, you can select which answer fits for you. We'll give it another couple seconds or so. It's great to see this live and just like see it changing as people like put their answers in.
Yeah, it's definitely not something I was expecting.
Yeah.
But it's I'm on the edge of my seat.
What's the next person gonna put in? Right. So it seems like you back, Tim. You wanna?
Oh, the dogs just got excited. Sorry, I got real distracted there.
No worries. Yeah. It's part of us being home nowadays, right? We have more distraction than being able to close an office door. All right. Well, thank you all for taking this. So it seems like we're kind of in the like middle of the road. Like some of us are like, we're not really comfortable, but we do it because we're human. We like have to get through these awkward situations. And some of us are feeling more comfortable than not too. Thanks. Pull this over. All right.
So we wanted to start just by like asking you guys, see if we could get in the chat or something, just some examples that you've had with clients, patients, where they've expressed like self-stigma or negative self-talk, just things that we'll say, if there's like certain phrases you hear repetitively, things like that.
Tim, what was your great example that you had, just to like kind of model that a little bit?
Well, there's like the standard sort of like the dropping dirty, the things like junkie, but one that I think is a little bit less subtle is just anything that starts with I can't. Because that you know, that's just kind of ruling out a whole branch of things, that like saying like I can't go back to school. Well, that's never absolutely the case.
So if people want to put some ideas in the I'm never going to get clean, thank you, Heather.
That's a good one.
Yeah, what have you heard that maybe like clients internalize what society tells them, or maybe the like Tim's previous ER visits where they just kind of ordering him to do things instead of being compassionate? Okay. I'm going to paraphrase up here a little bit as you guys all like toss in these awesome reflections. They labeled you.
No one understands.
Yeah.
And these are some really good examples. I'm happy to see some that are outside of that normal realm that we like the glaringly obvious words like junkie.
Mm-hmm. I don't care. Thank you. Now my dog is crying out here. I'm gonna... Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are very familiar with things that people may say that you realize are like negative self-talk that they're like internalizing, or societal stigma that they may be thinking is their true identity.
Yeah, I really like that. When I don't care there. That's I mean, something that people say without it really being taken as meaning much. But another final example I kind of had was an I don't know. Because that, say, for like, what is your dream job? I mean, and I don't know to that means that that person has never really thought about what their dream job would be or what they want out of their life. And that is definitely the product of negative self-talk, negative image, self-stigma. I mean, okay. So I saw that other next response. And so the reason why this is, with that being an ongoing state of trauma, and it being easily triggered, it is just bound to be the case that something like this will end up getting said. Something, or even if it's not, that the relationship, the alliance that is formed with the client will be damaged by simply them experiencing stigma. It may not even be related to the care they're receiving, but just the simple fact that they have this negative perspective on treatment, say, in general, because the history of healthcare and substance use treatment has been rather punitive. And so any sort of negative impact in their life in general is going to be carried into, and anything that triggers that is going to hinder the alliance.
And so with this, we just thought it would be a good kind of segue to realize, like, what are you hearing from clients, and like, what are you hearing that they say? And then how are we like reinforcing that or not reinforcing that, and trying to break that like automatic negative self-talk that they may have going on? So that's where we felt like the MI spirit really like played well into that, and kind of creates a nice structure or framework in order to continue to have that dialogue and alliance with clients. I mean, most of us are in this field because we care about people and we want to see them reach their full potential and know that they are valued and cared for in their life. And so in the third edition of the MI book, they created the MI Spirit, which includes these 4 components. And you all are likely already doing a lot of this stuff. I can see it in like the fact that you can identify like self-stigmatizing or negative self-talk that people are using in your interactions. And the point of this is just to like mindfully integrate some of these things. So the rest of the meeting or this webinar that we're going to have is talking about each of these, like finding out what the definition is and trying to apply it in our world. And one thing we want to point out is that like MI Spirit is like this tiny little circle in here, right? It is really hard to be like meeting with a client for the first time. You have to get their history. You have to get like an agreement signed up. You have to sign them up for their next appointment. Plus, like you also have to be making sure that you're creating a partnership and acceptance and compassion and evoking from them like their own experience. Like that's a lot. And like Tim mentioned at the beginning, like we're all human. We're gonna make mistakes, or we're gonna have our own stuff going on in our life, our own problems going on that may not allow us to like come to work or come to this interaction fully and successfully. So just like, yeah, this is ideal, right? To live in this little tiny circle, but it's a tiny circle. Like that is hard to fit into. So just giving ourselves like that grace and that freedom to make mistakes too. So let's start off with defining partnership. So MI is done for and with a person. Like what else do you guys see as a partnership? If you could toss some ideas into the chat. I'm realizing too that like we do this thing where we schedule all these webinars over the lunch period and then expect people to also like interact with us when they may be actually eating like their sandwich or whatever they're doing or going for a walk and like just listening in. So we are conscious of that, and we're talking among our team too to try to schedule things at different times. And just recognizing like where you guys may be too. So I'm gonna show some answers here. So a partnership in general is acknowledging that it's a collaboration between multiple experts, right? So like you as this provider or clinician or whatever your role is, you may be the expert on like MOUD treatment, right? Like you've read all the research, you know all of like the evidence-based models and like treatment plans and whatever in order to help people. But the people you're working with are the undisputed experts on themselves, right? So like we have all this research, but maybe it's a case study where it's like, this only applies to one person or it doesn't fit with everyone. And so MI like realize that this is more of a dance. It's not a wrestling match that you're having with people. So that's why there's this image over here of a dance party. Another way to think about this too is when we think about like risk assessments that we have to do around suicide. And there's a couple different ways you can ask someone if they're feeling suicidal. So you could say, you aren't thinking of killing yourself, are you? And that to me like comes off as if it's like, I'm like wrestling with you. Like, you're not thinking this, right? Like, please say no, or else like, I'm ready to fight you. Or like, I'm not comfortable talking about suicide. Like it kind of like presents all of that. Versus if I were to ask, like, are you thinking of killing yourself? To me, it just comes off as more like welcoming. Like, I'm willing to talk about this. It's straightforward. Like, I'm not putting any judgment on whether or not you are thinking about killing yourself. I'm ready and comfortable to talk about this whenever you are. So just recognizing like how you may word things too can kind of show if it's a partnership and something that you're willing to start dancing with the person, or if you feel like you're trying to wrestle them to get on topic. How about acceptance? Anyone have any definitions or thoughts around absolute worth, autonomy, accurate empathy, and affirmation?
Well, real quick, just back on that previous one.
Yeah, let me go back.
The example you gave with the suicide of are you thinking of committing suicide, or you're not, are you? That sort of distinction, like you can replace killing yourself with using and have that like exact same comparison. Like, you aren't thinking about using right now, are you? It sends that same sort of message as opposed to, are you thinking about using right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you're helping people in their treatment or whatever stage of the partnership that you have, right? Like, yeah, how are you wording things and how are you making it understood that this is a collaboration between the two of you?
And because MI is just so awesome, it's also expressing a certain degree of acceptance because it is just normalizing it. It is making it much more of a thing that we can just address. We don't have to like tap dance or like walk on eggshells around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although acceptance has a much more formal and technical definition that we're clearly going to get into.
Any thoughts on this? I think we should have set the stage a little bit more at the like beginning to let people know that we were hoping for more interaction too. So we can go through these definitions, and just to let you guys know that there are some spots towards the end where we want to get your guys' experiences as to like, how do you show these things?
You know, I think I would really have enjoyed to be a fly on the wall in the room where the conversation that boiled it down to these 4 things occurred.
Yeah.
I bet that was some very interesting discussion.
Yeah.
We have someone asking to repeat the question.
Yeah, so just what would you think is the definition of these items, and any of them, right? So like, how would you define like absolute worth, accurate empathy, autonomy, or affirmation? Or what does that look like for you in your work that you're doing? Thanks for asking that question. So accurate empathy, matching or identifying with precision and clear awareness of the individual's actual experience. Ooh, wow, fantastic. I think that's like straight out of the book. That's great. Thank you, Rena.
That is spot on.
Right?
I love it.
All right.
And just so, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like we have knowing who you are, your weakness should not define you. Yeah. Autonomy, a person's ability to make decisions and engage as they would like. Definitely. I'm going to show the next slide, and it sounds like you guys are just going to keep reaffirming the definitions that like the MI founders came up with. Yeah, so like absolute worth, that people like have like an inherent worth and potential, right? Accurate empathy. Raina gave us an excellent definition of that. And so just like an active interest, that you're like trying to see the world through like their eyes. Autonomy, so they can make their own decisions, right? And engage as much as they want. It's also relinquishing the power that we like never had. Like we don't have control over anyone. Like even if someone is like court mandated to be in our treatment, that doesn't mean that they have to come or have to do anything. Like if someone says you can't drink, like no, physically I can take my water bottle and drink, or I could take whatever and drink alcohol. Like it's always on that person to make their own choice and do whatever they want. And then affirmation. So kind of like what Dee Diaz too mentioned, like it's not a weakness and it doesn't define who you are. Like you have strength and effort and things that have gotten you to where you are today. Awesome. How about compassion? How would you all define compassion? attending to and responding to a person's suffering and need in a way that meets the person's needs. Ooh, I love how you like worded that it's like, it's not in a way that like serves me, right? Or that serves the clinic I work for or larger society. It's like the person's needs. That's great.
And the good little Buddhist in me just had to look this up real quick. But the Buddha defined it as the heart that trembles in the face of suffering.
Ooh. Yeah. So like that you're working like from your heart, right? Like you see the suffering and you are trying to like meet that person's needs in order to decrease that suffering.
I
Yeah,
like
so, like,
that. Go ahead.
Oh no, go.
I just like that addition. It could be any emotion too, not just suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like celebrating with clients or the people you work with. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the book says like actively promoting the other's welfare, giving priority to them. Like we're in this field to like help our clients, not for our own personal benefit. Yep, we are humans and everyone deserves to be helped. Absolutely.
And just to roll it back the step that everybody gets to determine their own sort of help.
Yes, it's making sure that you know the person's needs, right? So you're accurately empathizing with them and seeing from their perspective so that you can help them based on what they need, not what you assume that they need. How about evocation? What does that mean? Or like, how could that look with your interactions with clients? Or each other even too, right?
Yeah, full disclaimer or disclosure, I guess, when we were doing this, I had to look up the definition of evocation. It'd been so long since I had heard the word.
Yeah. Or like to evoke, like what happens when you're like evoking? I feel like evocation sounds like it's.
Yeah, when it's like conjugated like that, it makes more sense to me, but.
Yeah, like. So what does it mean to evoke from someone that you work with or partner with? To elicit from someone or something, yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to keep going because we want to do some practice in here too. But absolutely, Raina. So yeah, it's a strengths-focused premise, right? That like people have what they need like already within them, or they have the tools available to help them get to a new thing, even if they don't know exactly how to get there, right? And so it may be explicitly stating like you have what you need and together we will find it. So it's pulling out and strengthening the change motivations that people already have within them.
And I mean, when it comes to substance use disorder, I know I can speak to specifically, like nobody that can live in the life of active addiction is without skill. It requires significant amounts of resourcefulness. I mean, just ingenuity. Like it is a very just active problem-solving lifestyle.
Yeah. And so the fact that they've like made it through all of those challenges and obstacles and problems, and yeah, they have resources available and brain power to like figure out what's the next move and how can they get there.
And in the midst of a disease that affects choice, they're able to make the choice to come in and seek treatment. That speaks volumes.
Absolutely. So just summarizing overall, like the MI spirit is done like from the heart, so that point of compassion with someone, so that partnership, as you recognize their own strengths and their experiences. So evoking from them and also recognizing their absolute worth, their autonomy, all of that. So it's an intentional way of being and communicating. So let's start by thinking about how do you guys start a new alliance or a new partnership or like working with a new client? And and specifically within these components, like how are you all displaying a partnership, that this is something that you're working with the person or for the person? How do you show acceptance? And then I have a little cheat sheet down here too, just to remind us of what all these are. How do you show compassion? How do you evoke from clients? What does this all look like for you all? And this is going off the idea too, that like a lot of you answered that you're either like in the middle of the road with your comfort level with building new relationships and building that rapport, or you are comfortable, right? So this could be a spot to learn new ways that others have shown that this is a partnership with their client, or this is accepting them for who they are, and all those 4 components, showing compassion, evoking from them. All right. I'm gonna put these, where's my mouse? There we go. Great. So just even actively listening to them and asking more questions for clarification to show that you're like in this and you're interested in learning more about their situation or their experiences. Great. Awesome. Thank you for those. So being not judgmental, using like an easy tone of voice, validating, and asking more questions to kind of get from them where they may be going for that. Tim, I know you had that experience or that example too from like a agreement, right? For like partnership.
Yeah, one of the things that I've just found to be most for partnerships, specifically building that alliance there, is to sit down and just draw up a treatment agreement, where it is not something that's dictated like these are the rules. Sure, there can be like rules involved in it, things that like you have to enforce or like that have to be adhered to, but also giving them, the patient or the client, a voice in setting like what they see as reasonable expectations for themselves. Because I mean, treatments, you know, it's never going to be successful if the expectations aren't understood and aren't realistic.
Yeah.
And I mean, that goes a step further into just kind of like expressing some of those rules. Like one of the responses that we had gotten in there that really got us thinking was about a CPS involvement, CPS coming up, and like really like making it clear in there that like the requirements for mandatory reporting, sort of just kind of setting an even playing field with all the cards out and just like making it a dialogue.
So maybe in that agreement stating something like everything that we talk about is like private and confidential, except for these couple instances where we may have to bring another person into this partnership or another like entity into this partnership. So if you mention any thoughts of hurting yourself, others, any child or elderly abuse or neglect, then like I mentioned, we may have to bring someone else in just to make sure that everyone is safe and and making sure that you're all agreeing on it too, right?
And granted, I mean, that's not going to prevent any damage to that alliance down the road if it does come up, but it's at least, you know, a way to I mean, transparency is the best way to start a partnership. And so I mean, just giving the patient and the client as much with like knowledge and how to conduct themselves and what they should expect too. Like we have a lot of expectations of our patients and our clients, but we also have to understand that they have expectations of us.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. What's the most important thing I can do for you today? That's awesome.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I don't know where to put that. I feel like that's all of them. Like you're the center of that Venn diagram with that
is the
question,
spirit.
right? That's the
that
spirit.
is that small circle.
Yeah. I'm trying to type all these in there because I want to send this out to you guys. So you guys have all of these for your own like toolkits, or just as like another way to ask these questions or to kind of display this MI spirit. All right. So let's think about like if you feel like a relationship or a alliance has been fractured, like to start off with, like what are some signs that you would know that this alliance has been fractured or damaged a little bit? And someone gave a really good example in the answers too that they submitted as they registered. They mentioned that they just like kind of noticed that there was like a shift in their relationship. Like the person wasn't like the same person that they were before, and they noticed that they had to like reschedule an appointment. And so they actually talked about that with someone, and they're like, yeah, so it says that they utilized some like self-disclosure to repair the relationship, and it healed really quickly. And once they understood that, there was like more understand for like a change or how to like collaborate again. So what other things maybe like that you guys have noticed? So if someone's like their personality shifts, right? Or they may not be as engaged. I've also wondered after I see people like missing appointments, right? Like people have a lot of stuff going on. At the same time, is it something that I did or I could do better in order to make this seem like a valuable use of their time?
Yeah, something I want to come back to and really stress again is that the internalized stigma could cause a damage in that relationship that we didn't, as care providers, we didn't play an active part in. And so we can't only necessarily be like, we have to be mindful, not only look at like, what may I have done, but like, how are they behaving differently? Or so yeah, I mean, it has to be a lot less. I can't think the word I'm looking for.
Just like it's a lot, right? It's a lot to consider. Like, because it could be maybe that the like client used, right? And previously they've always been kicked out, or they've been told like you're gonna die if you do, like whatever kind of negative things. And so even though you created this great relationship and alliance with them, like in their head, they are perceiving how you're going to react if something happens, right? Or they share something. Does that sound like what you're thinking, Tim? Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was looking at like I was trying to figure out the better way to say self-centered, which is not what I meant to say. But it was like what kept coming to my mind. But yeah, like looking toward like all the things that could be going on in their life that invokes that response of I'm going to be punished. I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And really, like, situations like that have nothing to do with how the care is being delivered. It's just simply that that has been the norm.
Yeah. So how would you guys go about rebuilding that relationship or that alliance if that comes up, right? Like you realize that you had to reschedule or the client missed an appointment. Like what are some ways that you could maybe even explicitly, like how do you explicitly state that this is a partnership or that this is a alliance that includes acceptance and compassion?
This is definitely an area where I think it comes back to the wrestling and dancing for the rebuilding is it just addressing it directly and head on, and really owning it, and not like that's like the biggest thing for me is that like what can I do differently?
To me, that almost feels like that's another thing that is like the full MI spirit, right? Like you're evoking from the person like what they know works best for them. Let's see.
Yeah, I think asking what it's like, if I'm understanding that correctly, it's like really trying to understand the experience, like why, not just the how or did it damage, but like why did it damage it?
Like Tim mentioned that like addiction is like an active state of trauma, right? So maybe it's just like Tim was giving examples that it could be a smell or a color or like a sound or something that triggers people's like trauma, right? And so yeah, hearing, like being open to hearing what was it like for you, accepting their feelings and going through that. One thing we want to point out too is that not everything will be repairable too, right? Like this isn't like the golden rules and you do this and everything will work out perfectly. Like that's not the case. Some people just may not be in a position or are ready to accept this partnership. At the same time, are you just creating that space where you know that you can own mistakes that you have taken on or disruptions? I like that word that Raina used. And you're just kind of planting the seeds so that they know that if they are ready to enter treatment or get care or whatever it is you're providing, that can be an option in the future.
And really just that safe space.
Yes.
To make their own decision.
Absolutely. That was something that was quoted in the book that I really liked with thinking about acceptance, is that when you give people that safe space and you're not judging them and you're just giving them the opportunity to explore who they are and like what they want to achieve, then they're more likely to like, it's human nature to like be like progressing and moving in like a positive, like affirming change and momentum. So just creating that safe space can help them realize that they can take on these challenges, that they've already been through like hell and they can continue taking on these challenges through their treatment or whatever it is.
And the affirmations are huge there because it is just like, you are here.
Yeah.
Like that in itself says so much that like the person is just showing up even.
Absolutely.
And I also think, just real quick before I move on, for the rebuilding, repairing, like for the treatment agreement or something, whatever is done to initially form the alliance. It is always important for the rebuilding to revisit that. And because if it was damaged, if it was fractured or whatever word we want to use there, chances are that something in that original agreement could be revised. Whether it be their situation has changed, our hours have changed, just any number of things, but opening the door to giving them a voice in what that will be. Like, people want to have a voice in anything and everything. Like, we want our feelings and opinions to matter.
I think another thing we thought about too when we were like brainstorming for this and thinking about examples is like, what about if you never had an agreement, right? Or you never had this like more collaborative approach? Like, sometimes I think I would even be honest, right, and own it and be like, hey, I just went to like this discussion and we were talking about like creating the like mutual agreement that we both agree on and we're both like on board for and both like can get behind with this partnership. Like, what do you think about if we like do that today, right? So that moving on forward, like you're rebuilding and creating this dynamic that is more in line with MI spirit.
I hope, is it okay if I jump in here?
Yeah.
And say okay. I'm wondering, Timothy, I really appreciated hearing you, and I felt like this was too much to put in the chat box. So I really appreciated you saying like people wanting to know that their voice matters and like knowing that their voice matters. And I think that where my mind went with that was thinking about people who like in the past who may have not really felt like their voice mattered, or they felt rejected, or they felt like pushed to the side. And I'm wondering about in the MI framework, like of course acceptance, non-judgmental, compassion, all would address that. But I wonder about the trauma that might be perpetuating and how MI might address that trauma in a broader sense and in a social sense, because it's not just with a therapist that the person is experiencing that. Like us as therapists can help to create compassion, create acceptance, and help the person to move through. But then how would MI generalize that in larger society?
Because you're only meeting them with.
Not sure that I understand the question.
I understand it as like you're only meeting with this person for like 15, 20, maybe an hour time, right? And so like you can create this MI spirit environment, but then once they leave, they're gonna be triggered by other things or like face those.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then like how do you embolden them with this idea in all facets of life, not just in this relationship?
Yeah, using MI as the basis for it. Like I can think of lots of other trauma-informed practices, but I guess I don't view MI as always being trauma-informed, but I guess at the spirit of it, it is trauma-informed. But I guess if there's thoughts about how it might generalize.
I think a big part of MI is what we like to refer to as planting seeds. And so for a person who has that sort of experience where it's kind of universalized, generalized, that they don't matter, that their voice doesn't count, that having one safe space where it does, it's a hell of a lot better than none. It's a world of difference. So if it can be in that one place, well, where else could it be? And so it's not no trauma care or anything like that is really going to happen overnight, but it is at least showing to them, it's that reality check of that thing that you're telling yourself, that thing that you believe, that it's just simply not the case. Well, you've seen that it is now.
I think too, like MI is like a method to have a conversation, right? So I think like Tim's saying, creating that safe space for this person can help you continue and build on using trauma-informed treatments, right? Or incorporating CBT or whatever else in order to help that person challenge the interactions that they're having or the perceptions that they're having outside of your visit. Yeah,
I used the word like the reality checking. That's kind of the way I phrase it for myself when I think about like my own CBT skills and like what I do for myself, is that sort of like think of those situations that I experience that contradict my negative self-talk. And you know, my negative self-talk is typically in a very universal sense. It's very absolute. And so just drawing on those instances where like the absolute didn't fall apart, then like absolute is absolute. If it falls apart, it absolutely falls apart.
I think this helps too, thinking about it, like, are you like modeling, right? Like, it sounds like, Tim, what I'm hearing you say too, is that like, if you were to demonstrate this in your like, however long session or interaction that you have, that you can then share that with people and like kind of create that model. We're at 1 o'clock too, so I just wanted to go through like the rest of the slides real quick. We'll send this along so you guys can brainstorm on your own, like what it could look like if you're in a continuing relationship with someone and you just want to make sure that you're reinforcing the partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation. Katrina just put in the CEUs, so please take that evaluation. One thing we wanted to mention too is that like MI is very meta, and so Tim and I tried to even use partnership and acceptance and compassion and evoking throughout our whole thing. And so I think that kind of mirrors what I heard Tim just say to Raina's question, is that you're like modeling it constantly. And it's always like this going back and forth between like practicing it and implementing it. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. These will be in the slides. You can also reach out to your local BHC if you have any questions. References. Here's the CMEs again. And then there's more talks happening next week and continuing on. Just going to keep that up there. So here's some other upcoming ones. You can check all these out at the MichiganOpioidCollaborative.org/events. I think if you're interested in hearing more about like words and the stigma that people have, right, Tim? How would you describe? You're doing the talk. I'll let you talk.
That one next week is a very like natural offshoot connection to this one, and it's going to dive a little bit further into those more subtle sort of ways that dialogue, the subtle things that can be said that will invoke the stigma and kind of things that we can do to just kind of reduce that and like normalize it, as opposed to the standard conversation around language with addiction is a lot of don't says. But my perspective is kind of like, well, no, we should say a little bit more. We should just say some different things.
Yeah. So thank you all so much. It sounds like you all are doing amazing work already, and this is just kind of a refresher for you to think about other ways you can word things or kind of keep yourself engaged with the alliances that you're creating with the clients and the people you're working with.
Thank you, Laura and Tim, and thanks for everybody for your time. A behavioral health consultant is going to be following up with everybody who attended. And like Laura said, you can reach out to them with any additional questions. If you'd like to reach out to me, you know, you can find all of our email addresses and everything at MichiganOpioidCollaborative.org. And also a recording of this webinar is going to be posted to our website within the next couple of weeks. So thank you again so much for all of your time today and for attending, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.